The call came just after midnight, slicing through the quiet hum of the city like a razor. Detective Sam Bennett was halfway through a cup of stale coffee when the radio crackled to life. Possible 10 to 54. Male victim. Upper East, 49th floor penthouse. Name's Richard Collins. The name was familiar, a financial magnate, philanthropist, and the kind of man whose smile never reached his eyes. Bennett tossed the coffee into the sink, grabbed his coat, and headed into the cold rain that had turned Manhattan streets into sheets of glass. By the time he reached the tower, red and blue lights painted the night sky. Uniformed officers lingered near the entrance, speaking in hushed tones. One of them, a young patrolman, nodded nervously as Bennett flashed his badge. Top floor. Sir, the officer said. Scene secured. Looks like a suicide. Bennett grunted. They all do at first. The elevator doors opened to a sterile hallway lined with marble. The penthouse door stood open. Inside, the air was thick, the kind of silence that follows violence. A faint metallic tang lingered, blood and gunpowder. Richard Collins sat slumped in a leather chair near his desk, a revolver hanging loosely from his right hand. A neat, circular wound darkened his temple. A half-empty glass of whiskey stood beside a folded note on the desk. Captain Hughes, a broad man with tired eyes, turned as Bennett entered. Looks open and shut. Sam, he left a note. Safe's open. No signs of forced entry. Bennett approached slowly. His gaze swept across the room, the untouched carpet, the organized shelves, the faint imprint of a ring on the whiskey glass. Something didn't fit. He knelt beside the body and examined the revolver. .38 caliber Smith & Wesson, he muttered. Prints, just his, Hughes replied. At least that's what it looks like. Lab's on the way. Bennett frowned. You sure about that? He gently pried the weapon from Collins' hand. The angle was wrong. The shot entered the right temple, but the man's wrist showed no recoil burns, no tightening of the tendons. And Collins Bennett remembered the man's handshake from a charity event years ago was left-handed. He straightened up, glancing at the note. It read, I can't live with the truth. Forgive me. Convenient, Bennett said flatly. What truth? Hughes shrugged. You're thinking murder. I'm thinking setup, Bennett replied. The kind that's supposed to end questions before they start. He looked toward the open safe. Stacks of papers, envelopes, and a single missing space. A document or file had been removed recently. Dust patterns told the story. Something large had been there for years, until tonight. He turned to the forensics tech photographing the desk. Anything on the door locks? Clean. No tampering, the tech said. Security footage covers the hall, but there's a 5-minute blackout at 10:40 p.m. Power glitch. Bennett smirked. Yeah, sure. Power glitch. He walked to the window, looking out over the city. The rain streaked the glass in uneven lines, reflecting the flashing lights below. Behind him, the crime scene hummed with quiet efficiency. Officers murmured, cameras clicked, and a dead man's secrets began to stir. He noticed a small smudge near the desk leg, a partial shoe print in faint gray dust. Expensive, narrow tread, not the victim's. Someone had been there after the shot was fired. Someone who moved carefully enough to clean almost everything else. Bennett looked at the body again, then at the note, then back to the dark city beyond the window. Whoever did this, he murmured, wanted us to stop looking. Hughes exhaled. And you're not going to. Bennett turned, the ghost of a smile crossing his face. Wouldn't dream of it. He picked up the note, folded it into an evidence bag, and turned to leave. But just before stepping out, something caught his eye, a small, blinking light in the corner bookshelf. A hidden security camera, half burned, its lens cracked, but still faintly glowing. He moved closer. The recording light flickered once more, then died completely. Bennett froze. Hughes, he said quietly, get tech back in here. The captain frowned. Why? Bennett's voice dropped to a whisper. Because that camera didn't die in the blackout. He turned the broken lens toward him, a shiver running down his spine. It died after. Morning came gray and uninviting. The city had that washed-out look it wore after a night of rain. Streets slick, sky the color of wet ash. Detective Sam Bennett sat at his desk in the precinct, staring at the crime scene photos spread before him. The dead man's expression, calm, too calm, stared back through the glossy paper. Across the table, Captain Hughes sipped burnt coffee. "So," he said, "you still think it's murder?" "I think," Bennett replied, "that suicides don't stage perfect crime scenes and erase 5 minutes of video." He tapped a photo, a close-up of the gun, then the note. "The message is too neat. The handwriting, too steady. Collins didn't panic before dying. He planned something, or someone planned it for him." Hughes sighed. "We've got the partner coming in. Name's Marcus Reed. Worked with Collins 20 years. Built that empire together." Bennett raised a brow. "And now he inherits half of it." Exactly 2 hours later, Marcus Reed arrived, a tall man in his late 50s, sharply dressed, the kind of executive whose confidence filled every room he entered. His silver hair was combed immaculately, his suit crisp, his shoes spotless. He extended a hand toward Bennett. "Detective, terrible business, this. I still can't believe Richard is gone." Bennett didn't shake his hand. "Have a seat, Mr. Reed." Marcus sat smoothly, folding his hands on the table. "I've already spoken to your captain. I told him everything I know." "Then tell me again," Bennett said, voice low. "Where were you last night between 10 and 11? "At dinner with clients. The Bellington Hotel, downtown." "Check the reservation." "We will." "And after that?" "I went home, alone." He said it too quickly. Bennett's eyes narrowed. "You were aware Collins was planning to go public about the corruption in your company?" Reed's smile flickered. "Public? No. He was under pressure lately. Sure. But he wasn't himself. Paranoid. Bennett leaned forward. "Because he discovered millions missing from his charity's account." Reed hesitated. "Those funds were redirected. Temporarily. He knew that. And you expect me to believe a man who finds his best friend stealing money just decides to shoot himself and write a polite goodbye?" Reed's calm cracked for a second. He exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. "Detective, I'm not going to sit here and listen to insinuations. Richard was my brother in all but blood. His death hurts me more than you can imagine. Then, you won't mind helping me find out why the security feed in his building went dark for exactly 5 minutes before the shot was fired?" Reed blinked. "What are you implying?" "Someone killed him," Bennett said evenly. "Someone who knew his habits, had access to his penthouse, and wanted everyone to believe it was suicide." Reed's eyes hardened. "Do you have any evidence of that?" Bennett smiled faintly. "Not yet." After Reed left, Hughes walked back into the room. "You're pushing hard. That's how cracks show," Bennett replied. He stared at the empty chair Reed had occupied. "He's hiding something. Guilt leaves fingerprints too. You just have to look in the right light." He turned back to his notes. The forensics report had arrived. Fingerprints on the gun, the whiskey glass, and the safe. All matched Collins. But the smudge near the desk leg, the partial footprint, didn't belong to him. "Size 10, Bennett muttered. "Expensive Italian leather. Could be Reed's." Hughes said. "Could be," Bennett answered. "But Reed's smart. Too smart to leave a print that clean." That afternoon, Bennett paid a visit to Collins and Reed Holdings, a glass fortress towering over Midtown. Inside, employees whispered as he passed. The detective in the trench coat, eyes sharp as a scalpel. The receptionist led him to a private office lined with awards and framed magazine covers. He noticed one photo, Collins and Reed shaking hands beside a headline, "Two men, one vision." On the desk lay a half-finished glass of scotch and a tablet left unlocked. Bennett glanced around, then tapped the screen. Emails. The last one, sent just hours before Collins' death, was from Reed. Subject: "Let's meet tonight. No lawyers. Just you and me." Bennett frowned. That wasn't in Reed's statement. He copied the message to his notepad, just as a soft voice interrupted. "Detective Bennett." He turned. A woman stood in the doorway, mid-30s, neat blouse, trembling hands. "I'm Claire," she said. Mr. Collins' secretary. Bennett nodded. You were close to him. I worked for him for 6 years, she said quietly. He was a good man, strict, but fair. The last few weeks, though, he seemed scared. Scared of what? She hesitated, glancing toward the hallway. He told me once that he'd found something in the company records, something that could end everything. He didn't tell me what it was, just that he was meeting Marcus that night to settle things. Bennett's pulse quickened. Did he seem suicidal to you? She shook her head firmly. No. He talked about protecting the company, about making things right. He even said he had proof-y documents locked in his safe. Those documents weren't there last night, Bennett said. Someone took them. Claire's eyes widened. Then it's true. Tell me something, Bennett said. When you left yesterday, did anyone else stay in the office? She swallowed. Yes. Mr. Reed came back. He said he forgot his phone. I saw him go into Mr. Collins' office, but when I returned 10 minutes later, he was gone. Bennett closed his notebook. Thank you, Claire. That helps. As he walked out into the fading afternoon light, the city buzzed below, indifferent, alive, and utterly unaware that its towers were built on lies. Back at his car, Bennett replayed the evidence in his mind. Reed had motive, opportunity, and the arrogance to think he could get away with it. But something still bothered him, something small, like a splinter under his skin. He opened his notebook and stared at the copied email again. Let's meet tonight. No lawyers. Just you and me. The timestamp read 10:30 p.m., but Collins was already dead by then. So who sent the message? The rain came early that morning, sweeping through the narrow streets like gray ribbons. By the time Detective Bennett reached the harbor, the docks were shrouded in a mist so thick it swallowed sound. Warehouse 12 stood at the edge of the water, an old brick giant with rusted doors and broken windows, a place that had seen to many secrets and to few confessions. He parked the car and checked his watch. 11:56 p.m. The informant had said midnight. Bennett waited in the dark, the faint hum of ships moaning from the distance. The fog carried a cold, salty smell. Every echo of a footstep felt like a ghost moving between the crates. Then, a shadow. Someone was there. Bennett? A voice whispered. The man stepped out from behind a shipping container. Thin, pale, and nervous. He looked like someone who'd spent more time running than sleeping. I'm Mark Lenson, he said quietly. I worked with Rachel at the Sentinel. She trusted me. Then you know what she was working on. Mark nodded, glancing around. She found something in the harbor contracts, fake import records, containers that don't exist on paper but arrive anyway. She said Kane was using them to move something big. I think she was close to proving it. Drugs. Mark hesitated. Worse. Weapons. Bennett's jaw tightened. And the proof. She said she'd hidden it in her apartment, in case something happened. Before Bennett could ask another question, a sound tore through the fog, the sharp crack of a gunshot. Mark staggered backward, clutching his chest. The echo bounced off the steel walls like thunder. Mark. Bennett dove forward, but the man was already collapsing, his blood mixing with the rain on the ground. The detective looked around, catching a glimpse of a figure in the fog. Black coat, tall, moving fast toward the pier. Bennett drew his gun and sprinted after them, boots splashing through puddles, breath sharp and cold. He reached the edge of the dock just in time to see a boat engine roar to life. The figure jumped aboard and disappeared into the mist, leaving only a trail of waves and gasoline. Bennett cursed under his breath. Whoever they were, they knew exactly where to find Mark, and what he was about to say. By morning, the case had shifted from a suspicious death to an execution. At the precinct, Bennett reviewed Rachel's files again, piecing together names and dates. That's when something small, but odd caught his eye. Every one of Rachel's meeting logs had been typed and time-stamped except the last one. The entry was written in different handwriting. Meeting with AK, 9 p.m. AK, Arthur Kane. But Rachel never made it to that meeting. Someone else must have known, someone close enough to her to alter the records. That led Bennett to the Sentinel's office, a worn-out newsroom with flickering lights and the smell of burnt coffee. The staff barely looked up as he entered, too buried in deadlines or pretending to be. he found Evelyn Hart, Rachel's secretary, sitting at her desk, typing with methodical precision. Mid-30s, neat bun, sharp eyes, the kind that see everything but reveal nothing. "Miss Hart," Bennett said, flashing his badge. "I'm looking into Rachel Meyer's case." Her fingers froze for half a second before she turned. "Yes, detective. Tragic. We're all shocked. You handled her schedule, right?" "Yes." "So why was her last entry handwritten?" Evelyn hesitated. "Her computer crashed that day. She asked me to note it manually." Bennett leaned in slightly. "Did she mention what she was meeting Kane about?" Her gaze flickered. "Just once. No, she never discussed her work with me." But Bennett caught it, the faint tremor in her voice, the flick of her eyes toward the filing cabinet beside her desk. He waited a few beats, then nodded. "Thank you, Miss Hart. If you remember anything, call me." As he turned to leave, he noticed her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her coffee mug. He'd seen that kind of fear before, not guilt, but terror. Someone had warned her. Later that night, Bennett returned to the office. The building was dark, empty except for the hum of the city outside. He slipped through the back door, flashlight in hand, and opened the same filing cabinet Evelyn had glanced at. Inside was a folder labeled Meyer, Confidential. He flipped it open. Inside were photographs, blurry shots of shipping containers, dock schedules, and one image that made Bennett's stomach tighten. A man, tall, wearing a long coat, shaking hands with Arthur Kane beside a cargo truck. The man's face was half-turned, but Bennett recognized him instantly. Captain Ward, Harbor Security, and one of Bennett's old friends. He felt the air grow heavier. If Ward was part of this, then Rachel hadn't just been chasing corruption, she'd been chasing a ring that reached from the newsroom to the police department itself. Suddenly, a soft noise came from the hallway, the creak of a floorboard. Bennett turned off his flashlight and drew his gun. The sound came again, closer this time. He waited in silence as footsteps approached the door. Then a voice, soft, trembling. "Detective Bennett, are you still here?" It was Evelyn. Her face was pale, eyes wide with fear. "They know you've seen it," she whispered. "You have to leave. Now." "Who's they?" he demanded. But before she could answer, the glass behind her shattered with a deafening crash. A single bullet tore through the air, striking her in the chest. Evelyn fell to the floor. Bennett dove for cover, heart pounding, as another shot splintered the desk beside him. He crawled toward the window, firing once into the darkness. Then, silence. Whoever it was had already vanished into the night. He turned back to Evelyn. She was still breathing, barely. Blood pooled beneath her hand as she struggled to speak. Her voice was a whisper. "Check. The lighthouse." Her eyes went still. Bennett sat there for a moment, surrounded by papers, gun smoke, and the faint hum of the city outside. The lighthouse. He didn't know yet what waited there, but he knew it was where everything began, and where it might all end. The storm had rolled in by the time Bennett reached the northern cliffs. Rain lashed against the windshield like broken glass, and the wipers could barely keep up. The old lighthouse loomed above the jagged rocks, a pale skeleton against the black sea, its single beam flickering weakly through sheets of fog. The place had been abandoned for years. Officially, it was closed due to structural decay. Unofficially, it had become a storage site for the harbor authority, a quiet spot no one bothered to visit. Perfect for hiding something worth killing for. Bennett parked the car off the road and checked his revolver. 6 rounds. The city below was swallowed by fog, and only the low growl of waves filled the silence. He adjusted his coat and climbed the narrow, slippery path to the entrance. The heavy door creaked open with a groan. Inside, the air smelled of salt, rust, and old oil. His flashlight swept across the dusty walls, crates stacked along one side, a broken desk, ropes coiled like dead snakes on the floor. He listened. Nothing. Just the distant crash of the tide. Then he saw it, a faint light seeping through a crack in the floorboards near the back of the room. Bennett knelt and pried one loose. Beneath it, a trap door. He drew his gun and pulled it open. A narrow staircase spiraled downward into darkness. Each step groaned beneath his weight. The deeper he went, the colder the air became, until he reached a small underground chamber lit by a single, flickering bulb, and there, on a table in the center, sat a metal box marked AK. Private. Bennett approached slowly. The box was locked with a simple latch and a small keypad. Rachel's last investigation had mentioned something about coded containers. He remembered the note she'd left in her hand. Tell him I know about the harbor. He entered harbor. The light turned green. The latch clicked open. Inside were files, photographs, and several flash drives. He skimmed through the papers. Invoices for container shipments, all falsified. Records of offshore accounts linked to Kane's company, North Shore Exports. But that wasn't what froze him in place. It was a list of names. Half the city's officials, police officers, and businessmen, all receiving consulting payments, including Captain Ward, including to judges. And then, halfway down the page, another name in bold ink, Detective L. Bennett. He stared at it, disbelief twisting into anger. They forged this, he muttered. The sound of boots scraping against the stone floor made him spin around. Still playing hero, aren't you, Bennett? A voice said from the shadows. Captain Ward stepped into the light, gun raised, rain dripping from his coat. I told you before, you dig too deep. You'll drown. You killed her, Bennett said. His voice was calm, but his grip tightened. Rachel Meyer and the secretary. Ward shook his head. They killed themselves the moment they touched this file. Kane's too powerful to cross. You should have walked away. Funny? Bennett said. I was about to tell you the same thing. For a second, neither moved. The storm raged outside, thunder rolling over the cliffs. Then Ward fired. The bullet grazed Bennett's shoulder, sending him sprawling behind a crate. The pain burned, sharp and deep. He fired back, the shot ricocheting off metal. Ward ducked, moving closer. End of the line, detective. Ward shouted. You think anyone's going to believe you now? You're in the files. Bennett grabbed the metal box, clutching it against his chest as Ward approached. His mind raced. If Ward destroyed the evidence, Rachel's death, and everything she'd uncovered, would vanish into the tide. He waited until Ward was close enough to see the glint of his gun barrel. Then Bennett kicked the table forward, slamming it into Ward's knees. The captain fell with a curse, gun slipping from his hand. Bennett lunged, driving his shoulder into Ward's chest. The two men crashed against the wall, fists flying. Ward was stronger, but Bennett fought with something else. Fury, grief, and the cold knowledge that no one else would finish this if he didn't. Ward swung hard, striking Bennett across the jaw. You were good, Bennett, but you should have stayed dirty like the rest of us. Bennett spat blood. Not my style. He drove his elbow into Ward's ribs, then shoved him backward. The captain stumbled, lost his footing, and fell through the open trap door. His scream swallowed by the sea below. Bennett stood there for a moment, breathing hard, rain blowing through the open door above. Then he looked down at the file box. The papers were soaked, but intact. He picked them up, closed the lid, and whispered, You didn't die for nothing, Rachel. By dawn, he was back in his car, the lighthouse shrinking in the rearview mirror. The storm had passed, but the horizon still looked bruised. He knew Kane wouldn't go quietly. Men like that never did. But now, Bennett had the leverage. The truth, and truth, in this city, was the most dangerous weapon of all. Still, something gnawed at him. Evelyn had told him they knew he'd found the files. But Ward was just one man. Who were the others? He reached for his phone to call the precinct, then stopped. The screen lit up with a new message. No number. Just a few words. You shouldn't have gone to the lighthouse. Bennett's pulse quickened. He looked in the rearview mirror. A black sedan was following him. Detective Bennett gripped the steering wheel tightly, rain still streaking across the windshield as the black sedan mirrored every turn he made through the empty streets of the city's northern district. Early morning fog clung to the buildings like wet cloth, muffling the roar of engines and the hum of neon signs flickering on closed storefronts. He could feel it, the constant presence behind him. Not just the car, but the knowledge that someone knew every move he made. Someone patient, calculating, and willing to wait. Bennett slowed at a red light, keeping the sedan in his rearview mirror. It stayed back, like a predator sizing up its prey. He flicked on his turn signal, cut down an alley, then doubled back. The black sedan mirrored him flawlessly. Whoever was in there wasn't just following. They were anticipating him. He cursed under his breath. Amateur mistake, he thought. You've been too obvious. He needed a safe place. Somewhere he could review the files from the lighthouse without being watched. The precinct wasn't an option. The corruption ran too deep. Not after Ward. Not after Kane. Then he remembered an old, disused parking garage near the waterfront. Few cars ever parked there. Security cameras had been disabled years ago. It would be perfect. Bennett turned sharply, tires squealing on wet asphalt, and made a beeline for the garage. As he approached, the sedan followed but kept its distance, just enough to keep him in sight. He parked and slipped out of the car, flashlight in hand, and moved quickly up to the shadowed stairwell that led into the upper levels. Inside, the air smelled of damp concrete and mildew. The echo of his own footsteps sounded too loud. He ducked behind a concrete pillar and watched the entrance. The sedan stopped below. Two figures stepped out. Ward's men. Well-dressed, calm, armed. Bennett's stomach tightened. He was alone. And the files in the metal box, evidence that could bring down Kane and half the city's officials, were in the trunk. He needed a distraction, something to separate them. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a smoke grenade, old issue, but still effective. He tossed it toward the bottom of the ramp. Thick, white smoke erupted, filling the stairwell in moments. The men cursed and covered their faces. Bennett moved quickly, slipping down another corridor and into the shadows of the lower level. He could hear their frustrated shouts echoing off the concrete walls. Then, a sound behind him, footsteps, close, fast, and deliberate. He spun, gun drawn. A figure emerged from the fog. Not one of Ward's men, too tall, too light on their feet. Someone familiar, someone unexpected. Detective Bennett, the voice said, calm, almost amused. I see you found the files. He lowered his weapon slightly, recognition dawning. Evelyn Hart, his mind raced. She had survived the shooting at the Sentinel. How and why was she here, following him? You should have stayed out of this, she whispered. You're in over your head. Try telling me that 2 days ago when your boss was gunning for me. Bennett said, explain the files. Evelyn. Now, she hesitated, glancing back toward the stairwell where Ward's men were coughing in the smoke. Kane, he's bigger than you think. He doesn't just control the docks or the police. He controls the city, all of it. And if those files leave this garage, everyone on that list is dead, including you. Bennett's pulse quickened. Then we take it public. Expose him. That's what Rachel wanted. Evelyn shook her head. Rachel underestimated him. She thought the truth was enough. It's not. Not for Kane. A loud crash echoed from above. The smoke had cleared. Ward's men were moving down the ramp, weapons ready. Bennett and Evelyn backed into the shadows, calculating their next move. You leave me no choice, Bennett muttered, clutching the box. If you want to stop me, you'll have to take it from me. Evelyn's eyes flickered, a mix of fear and resolve. Then, before he could react, she lunged. Not at him, but at the ramp. She kicked one of Ward's men in the shin, sending him sprawling. The other fired blindly, the bullet grazing the wall. Bennett seized the moment, rushing forward and tackling the man to the ground. Chaos erupted. Shouts, gunfire, the metallic clatter of falling weapons. In the confusion, Bennett and Evelyn slipped past, sprinting to the exit where Bennett's car waited. They jumped in. Bennett hit the gas. The sedan was still behind them, but Evelyn had brought something else, a remote device that caused the pursuing car to swerve violently, crashing into a pile of shipping containers. Breathing heavily, Bennett glanced at her. Why help me? After what happened at the Sentinel? Evelyn's eyes hardened. Because Rachel trusted you. And I trust you too. For now, they drove in silence for a few minutes, rain washing the streets, the city still asleep. Bennett held the metal box tightly on his lap. Inside lay not just evidence, but the key to bringing down Arthur Kane. If they survived the night, then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. he answered. A distorted, robotic voice said only 3 words. Check the docks. Bennett's stomach dropped. He looked at Evelyn. She's not finished, he said quietly. Night had fallen again, but the city seemed quieter than usual, as if it, too, held its breath. Detective Bennett drove through narrow streets, Evelyn Hart beside him, the metal box containing the lighthouse files resting heavily on his lap. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective under the orange glow of street lamps. The docks were a labyrinth of containers, cranes, and shadowed alleyways, stretching like a metallic jungle into the harbor. Dockworkers were long gone, leaving only the groan of chains and the slap of waves against the pier. A fog rolled in from the water, curling around the containers like ghostly fingers. Bennett parked near a stack labeled North Shore Exports, the same company connected to every illicit shipment Rachel had uncovered. He stepped out, flashlight in hand, and scanned the area. Every shadow seemed to move, every reflection in the water a lurking figure. Stay close, he murmured to Evelyn. This isn't just about evidence anymore. It's about staying alive. They moved carefully, feet crunching over gravel and rusted metal. As they approached a larger container, Bennett noticed faint footprints in the dust, a trail that seemed to wind purposefully toward the end of the pier. He followed, motioning for Evelyn to stay low. At the end of the pier, a small warehouse sat, dimly lit from inside. Bennett signaled her to stay back while he approached the door, flashlight sweeping over the exterior. Something didn't feel right. The quiet was too perfect, too deliberate. Inside, figures moved quickly, shadows shifted across crates. Voices murmured. He recognized them immediately. Kane's men, 2 of them, armed and watchful, guarding what appeared to be a pile of documents and several suspicious-looking crates. Bennett ducked behind a stack of containers and whispered to Evelyn, "We need a distraction." "I get the box in." He handled their attention. Evelyn nodded, gripping a small flare she had brought with her. Bennett peeked around the corner and saw one of Kane's men step too close to the edge of the warehouse. She threw the flare toward a corner of the dock. It hit with a hiss and burst into fiery orange light, illuminating the fog and startling the guards. Bennett moved fast, grabbing the box and pushing Evelyn toward the shadows. The guards shouted, confused by the sudden light. One fired a warning shot, but Bennett and Evelyn sprinted across the pier, slipping between stacks of containers. Hearts hammering. Suddenly, a figure blocked their path. Tall, imposing, and unmistakably dangerous. Arthur Kane himself. His eyes were sharp, calculating, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "You should have stayed home, Detective," Kane said, voice low and measured. "Do you really think a box of papers can bring me down?" Bennett gritted his teeth. "It's not about the box, Kane. It's about the truth. And I'm taking it with me." Kane laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Then you'll die trying." The first shot rang out. Bennett ducked, rolling to the side as the bullet ricocheted off the metal dock. Evelyn stumbled but kept her footing. Kane advanced, relentless, using the crates as cover. Bennett returned fire, careful, precise. Every second felt stretched, every heartbeat a countdown. They were cornered, trapped between Kane and the edge of the pier. Bennett realized there was no way to outgun him, only outsmart. He grabbed a length of rope from a nearby crate and yanked it toward a stack of containers. With a powerful swing, the rope knocked a crate loose, sending it teetering dangerously toward Kane. Kane lunged, trying to stop it, but the crate toppled, striking him and knocking him into the water. He flailed, barely keeping his head above the waves before disappearing into the fog. Bennett and Evelyn exhaled, shivering from adrenaline and the cold harbor wind. The documents were safe. Kane was gone, for now. But the threat remained. Someone else could still be watching. They retrieved the rest of the files from the warehouse, careful not to disturb anything else. The fog seemed to close in around them as they made their way back to the car, hearts still racing, breaths uneven. Bennett looked at Evelyn. "We've won this round," he said quietly, "but Kane won't stay down. Not for long." Evelyn nodded, clutching the files tightly. "Then we make sure the next time he doesn't get a chance." As they drove away, the harbor lights reflected in the water like shattered gold. and somewhere in the mist, a shadow watched, waiting for the next move. Bennett and Evelyn had escaped the docks, but the city felt smaller, narrower, and more dangerous than ever. Every street seemed like a trap, every passerby a potential threat. Kane was out there, watching, waiting, planning his next move. They decided to leave the city temporarily. Bennett needed a safe place to review the files and plan. Evelyn suggested a remote cabin she knew, deep in the Alaskan wilderness, isolated, off-grid, surrounded by dense forest and mountains. It was perfect for hiding from Kane and his men. After hours of driving, the skyline of the city disappeared behind them, replaced by towering pine trees, snow-dusted peaks, and winding icy roads. Night fell early in the forest, and a dense fog rolled in, reducing visibility to a few feet. Bennett's instincts, honed over years of cases, kept him alert. Every snapping branch or rustle of leaves set his nerves on edge. They reached the cabin. Small, rustic, and secluded, it sat beside a frozen lake. Bennett carried the files inside, checking the locks and securing the perimeter. Evelyn lit a fire in the stone hearth, the warm glow providing the first comfort since the docks. Hours later, after reviewing the files, Bennett stepped outside for fresh air. That's when he noticed it. Massive paw prints in the snow leading up to the cabin. Too large, too deliberate. A bare dot. The thought of Kane's men stalking them faded instantly. This was primal. Raw, life and death stripped of politics or corruption. He knew the forest. He had hunted. But no training could fully prepare him for facing a cornered grizzly. The bear emerged from the tree line. Massive, fur-matted with snow, eyes black and unyielding. Bennett grabbed his rifle, but instinct told him it might not be enough. The bear roared, the sound echoing across the frozen lake. He backed into the cabin, trying to keep between Evelyn and the animal. It circled, sniffing, growling, muscles rippling beneath thick fur. The tension was unbearable. One wrong move, and it could end in seconds. Bennett remembered survival tactics. Bears attacked with momentum, rarely stopping once they charged. He needed to use the cabin's narrow entrance to his advantage, forcing the bear to slow. He grabbed a heavy metal poker from the fireplace and planted his feet firmly. The first charge came, the cabin shaking as the bear slammed into the doorway. Bennett pushed back, letting the bear's weight force it into a corner. It turned, snapping, eyes fixed on him. He jabbed with the poker, aiming for the soft areas beneath the jaw. Hours felt like minutes. Exhaustion burned in his arms and legs. The bear lunged repeatedly, but Bennett's strategy worked, guiding it toward the frozen lake, where its footing was less stable. With one final push, he tripped the bear on the ice, sliding it into the lake's edge. It struggled, roaring, claws flailing. Bennett, drenched and freezing, kept his distance but maintained control. Eventually, the bear retreated, disappearing into the forest, defeated but alive. Bennett slumped against the cabin wall, gasping for air. Evelyn emerged from inside, pale and shaking. I thought it was over, she whispered. Bennett wiped blood and sweat from his brow. It's never over. But sometimes, surviving means outsmarting the predator, not overpowering it. The files were safe. The cabin was intact, and for the first time in days, Bennett allowed himself a moment of relief. Yet he knew Kane's shadow still loomed, and the next confrontation would be just as dangerous, only with human cunning instead of nature's raw force. The night settled over the forest, quiet but ominous. Bennett stared at the dark tree line, knowing the fight for truth was far from over. The first light of dawn filtered through the frost-covered windows of the cabin, casting a pale glow over the scattered papers and files Bennett and Evelyn had been reviewing. Outside, the forest seemed quiet, deceptively so. The bear attack had been a stark reminder that danger could come from anywhere. But now, the threat was human. Kane was patient, cunning, and ruthless. Bennett sat at the table, tracing the connections on the files, shipping logs, bank transfers, names of city officials, all pointing to one man, Arthur Kane. But something didn't add up. Several payments listed on Rachel's files had strange time stamps, almost as if someone had altered them. Evelyn poured coffee, her hands trembling. Detective, are you sure we can trust everyone? These files are explosive, but someone could be feeding Kane information right now. Bennett nodded slowly. I've learned the hard way that even allies can be enemies. We have to assume everyone around us has a motive, or a secret. The cabin door creaked open behind them. Bennett's gun was already in hand, trained on the shadow. Relax, a familiar voice called. Mark Lenson stepped inside, soaked from the snow outside. Eyes wide but desperate. Detective, I thought I'd find you here. I have information, something Rachel wanted you to know. Bennett lowered his gun cautiously. You nearly died at the docks. Mark, if this is another trick, I swear, I'm on your side. Mark said, holding his hands up. Kane is planning something big. A shipment tomorrow night at the harbor. Weapons. If it goes through, the city will be in chaos. Evelyn frowned. Then why didn't you come earlier? Why let Rachel die? Mark hesitated. I tried. Kane's men are everywhere. I barely escaped. I thought I could warn you in time. Bennett studied him carefully. He wanted to believe Mark, but something felt off. Where's your phone? He asked. Noting Mark kept glancing at the cabin window, Mark froze. I left it in the car. Bennett motioned toward Evelyn. Check it. She went outside. A few minutes later, she returned, face pale. Someone called from your phone. Mark? Minutes ago. Kane's men were tracking it. Bennett's heart sank. Mark, you've been followed. Or worse, used. Mark's eyes widened. No, I wouldn't. Suddenly, the cabin door slammed open. Kane's men were outside, weapons drawn, their boots crunching in the snow. Mark froze, realizing the truth too late. You, Bennett said through gritted teeth. You led them here. Mark's shoulders sagged. I didn't have a choice. They threatened my family. I had to do it. Bennett's mind raced. Betrayal had a face now. It was Mark, someone Rachel trusted, someone he had almost trusted. Evelyn, Bennett shouted. Go around the back. Take the files. Mark's gaze fell to the metal box. One of Kane's men lunged, and chaos erupted. Bennett fired, taking cover behind the table. Mark tried to grab the box, but Bennett shoved him, sending him stumbling into the snow. The cabin became a storm of bullets and shouted commands. Bennett fired carefully, disabling the nearest man without killing him, every second counting. Evelyn ran around the back with the files, disappearing into the forest just as snow began to fall heavier. Mark tried to run after her, but Bennett intercepted him. No, Mark, you've done enough damage. Mark's face twisted in guilt and fear. Detective, I didn't want it to end like this. I thought I was helping. You helped Kane, Bennett said coldly. And now you pay the price for your choices. With a swift move, Bennett incapacitated Mark, tying him to a sturdy beam inside the cabin. Outside, the last of Kane's men retreated into the fog. Their mission failed for now. Bennett stood in the snow, looking at the forest, the frozen lake, and the fading footprints of Kane's men. The files were safe. Evelyn was alive, but the betrayal stung sharper than any wound. Trust in this game was fragile, and Rachel's death had been a brutal reminder. As Bennett untied the box, his phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. You're getting too close. Stop or lose everything. He read it silently, feeling the weight of every life depending on the next move. Kane was relentless, and now, so was he. The Alaskan wilderness had become both a refuge and a trap. Detective Bennett and Evelyn Hart had spent days planning, poring over the files Rachel had left behind. Every shipment, every transfer, every name led to one inevitable conclusion. The final confrontation with Arthur Kane was coming. The storm from earlier in the week had cleared, leaving the forest blanketed in thick snow and an eerie silence. Bennett knew Kane would expect him to act recklessly, so he devised a strategy that relied on patience, deception, and surprise. Evelyn checked the metal box once more. All the files are intact. Bennett nodded. We can't afford a single mistake. Kane has men everywhere. Even here, they could be watching. They decided to lure Kane out. The plan was simple in theory. Create a false trail suggesting they would transfer the files to a trusted journalist in the city. Kane wouldn't resist. He would come. Bennett spent hours setting traps, using decoy vehicles and encrypted messages. They buried motion sensors, prepared escape routes, and even rigged a signal system to communicate silently in case of surprise attacks. Every step was calculated, every possibility anticipated. Night fell. The cabin's windows glowed faintly with the light of lanterns. Bennett crouched behind a stack of firewood, Evelyn beside him, both alert to every sound, the rustle of the trees, the distant howl of a wolf, even the gentle crunch of snow underfoot. Then they saw him. Kane emerged from the tree line, flanked by two heavily armed men. He wore his signature long coat, moving with that calm, assured air that had allowed him to survive and manipulate for decades. He glanced around, taking in the scene, unaware that Bennett had set his trap. "Detective Bennett," Kane said, voice low and measured, almost amused. "I see you've prepared, but preparation can only go so far." Bennett didn't respond. He signaled Evelyn. In perfect synchronization, the tripwires Bennett had laid down triggered small, non-lethal explosions and bright flares, momentarily disorienting Kane's men. They fired, but the snow muffled the shots, and Bennett and Evelyn moved silently toward the cabin, the metal box still secured. Kane realized too late that the journalist transfer was a decoy. Bennett emerged from the shadows, revolver aimed, every nerve sharp with focus. "You're cornered, Kane," Bennett said. "No more hiding, no more manipulation. It ends tonight." Kane's smile remained, though it was tighter now. "You think you can take down a city with a few papers?" Bennett stepped forward. "No, I think you underestimated the cost of truth." The standoff lasted seconds, but every second felt like hours. Kane's men advanced, but Bennett and Evelyn had positioned themselves strategically, forcing them into narrow lines of fire and using the forest and snow to their advantage. Shots rang out, ricocheting off trees, snow flying, echoing through the wilderness. One of Kane's men lunged at Evelyn. Bennett reacted instinctively, knocking him down with a precise shot. Kane tried to escape toward the tree line, but Bennett anticipated it. He fired, the bullet striking Kane's arm, forcing him to his knees in the snow. The moment was tense, silent except for Kane's ragged breathing. Bennett approached, revolver trained steadily. "It's over, Kane. Surrender, or face the consequences of your actions." Kane looked up, eyes cold but calculating. For a heartbeat, it seemed he might resist. Then he slowly raised his hands, signaling surrender. Bennett cuffed him, securing Kane while Evelyn retrieved the files. The metal box was heavy with the weight of evidence, but the satisfaction of justice, temporary though it might be, made every bruise, every sleepless night, every betrayal worth enduring. The storm of corruption that had plagued the city was not entirely over. But for now, Bennett had dismantled its core. Kane's network would unravel. Officials on Rachel's list would face scrutiny, arrests, and trials. The truth had survived. Bennett looked at Evelyn. "We did it." Rachel would be proud. She nodded. "But this is only the beginning. The city will fight back. Kane has allies we don't even know about." Bennett allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Then we'll be ready." The snow fell softly, covering the forest in a quiet white blanket. For the first time in weeks, Bennett allowed himself to breathe. The predator had been cornered. The files were safe. And though the city awaited the next challenge, they had won tonight. The Alaskan morning was crisp and clear. The storm had passed, leaving the forest and frozen lake glistening under the pale winter sun. For the first time in weeks, Detective Bennett felt a moment of stillness, a fragile calm, but one earned through blood, sweat, and unrelenting tension. Arthur Kane sat in the back of the police vehicle, cuffed and silent, his long coat dusted with snow. He had lost his composure the night before, and now the weight of inevitability pressed upon him. Bennett had handed over the files to federal authorities before sunrise. The evidence was airtight: fraudulent shipments, offshore accounts, bribed officials, and detailed records linking Kane to a sprawling network of corruption. Kane's empire would crumble. Evelyn Hart stood beside Bennett at the edge of the frozen lake, watching the convoy disappear into the distance. Her eyes were tired, reflecting the sleepless nights, the betrayals, and the danger that had stalked them from the docks to the wilderness. Yet there was relief, tempered by the lingering knowledge that survival came at a cost. Bennett broke the silence. It's done. Kane won't walk free again. Not now, not ever. Evelyn exhaled slowly. We exposed him. Rachel's work. It wasn't in vain. Bennett thought of Rachel Meyer, the journalist whose curiosity had sparked this chain of events. Her courage had cost her life, but it had also sparked justice. He looked down at the snow, imagining footprints she might have left, leading them to the truth. Do you ever think it's enough? Evelyn asked quietly. All this, fighting, risking our lives, is it ever truly over? Bennett shook his head. Not really, but sometimes it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be enough to set things right. He glanced around the cabin and the forest, the bare tracks still faint in the snow, a reminder of raw danger and survival instincts. The wilderness had tested him as much as Kane had. It had been a trial by fire, ice, and steel. Every challenge had sharpened his instincts, forced him to trust his mind and body in ways he hadn't before. Evelyn folded her arms, staring at the distant horizon. And what now, detective? Do we stay here, in the middle of nowhere? Bennett smiled faintly, the first genuine smile in days. No, we take the files, we report everything, and we let the law do its work. Then, we decide what kind of life is left for us. They walked toward the cabin, boots crunching in the snow, carrying the weight of evidence, courage, and exhaustion. The forest seemed almost peaceful now, the threat of Kane gone, the predator subdued. The bear in the wilderness had been a test of raw survival, Kane a test of cunning and persistence. Bennett had survived both. Back in the city, arrests would follow. Kane's men would face justice. Corrupt officials would answer for their crimes. And somewhere, high above, Rachel Meyer's legacy would be honored, the truth finally exposed, her work complete. As Bennett and Evelyn reached the cabin, the wind swept across the frozen lake, carrying with it a sense of finality. The files were safe. Kane was captured. The city could begin to heal. And in the stillness of the Alaskan wilderness, Bennett allowed himself to believe that justice, fragile though it might be, had been served. He looked at Evelyn. We made it. She nodded, the cold biting but insignificant compared to the relief washing over them. We did. The sun rose higher, glinting off the snow like a promise that courage, persistence, and truth could survive even the darkest threats. The city, the corruption, the danger, it all felt a little smaller now, and for Bennett, that was enough.